It's always fun to play with a twin needle on your sewing machine. And do you know you can do more than just straight stitch? You can do decorative stitches, kind of like what the package is showing here. Now there's something neat about this machine. When we tell the machine that we are putting a twin needle on, number one, it will limit your stitch width for you, and so you don't accidentally break it by picking the wrong stitch and it having the wrong setting. So the first thing you want to do is go to your settings and go to twin needle, and then tell it what size you're putting on. On the packages that I have here, one is a 2.0, and so that means that the needles are 2 millimeters apart, and this one is 4 millimeters apart. So I'm going to do the 2.0, so I'll tell the machine that's the size that I'm using. Now look, your stitch is actually going to show you how it's going to look doubled. So that means that if I go ahead and pick a decorative stitch, it will actually show me what that's going to look like. Kind of like virtual sewing, but without, but it's going to be much cooler with thread. Now watch this stitch right here. If I go back to my twin needle and put on that 4.0, and now look. See how it spreads that out? And that's because the needles would have been further apart, and so the stitches will also be further apart. And it will limit how wide I can actually go. So my 4.0 double needle plus my maximum width of 5.0, 4 plus 5 is 9. That's why I can go all the way up to 9 millimeters. I can make this narrower if I chose to, but it definitely maxes me out when it knows what size of twin needle we're actually using. So we'll go back to 2. You'll notice this will go to 6. It will stop at 7 because 2 plus 7 is 9. And I can do any size lower than that as I desire. Look, I could even make it longer. Wouldn't that be fun? All right, so how do we thread for a twin needle? Actually, we'll put the needle on first. So let's pull the needle out. We've got our screwdriver and loosen up our screw. Now, the one thing about our needles, once we go ahead and put them in, is that the needle threader does not work. So you are on your own for threading this needle yourself. So go ahead and make sure you get it all the way up as high as it'll go, and then give it just a little turn, not too much, just enough to make it a little tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose a variegated thread and my current color of thread I've been using, but notice the size of this spool. This spool is very, very thick and heavy because it's full. I'm going to use and put this to lay down, and I'll use this on my horizontal spool pin, and then I'm going to put my lighter spool on the vertical one. So I'm going to just set that one up here. So the only thing is that if I have 2 fuller spools, I would recommend like a thread stand that you'd put beside your machine to put those threads on. And actually, as I'm thinking about it, we should probably put one of those little caps underneath it, and then it can kind of sit on that as we stitch. Now, as we go to thread it, most everything will be threaded together. Nothing is going to really be different except for right here. If you look here, you'll notice that there is a fin, and that is a separation guide for when we use 2 threads. Now, it doesn't matter which thread goes on which side, so I'm going to just pick one, but I'm watching which one is going on which side, so I know that they're separate. That means I get I actually have 2 tension discs, and that means each thread is going to get its own pinch when the presser foot goes down. So I'm make sure I'm going to pull tight. I'm threading with purpose. Remember, give those a nice kind of firm pull down into your tension disc, and now I will go ahead and thread the needles. I was going to say attempt to thread the needles because yes, they are getting smaller as we age. And this would be a great time. Your Pfaff sewing machine store does have handheld needle threaders. If you ask them for them, they're the ones that come with the sergers, and that's the greatest handheld needle threader in the world. But today's looking good here. So I'm going to just go ahead and thread that right on through. So usually when I start sewing, I start with a straight stitch just to make sure everything's looking good. I tend to start off sewing a little slower, nothing too crazy and full speed. But once I kind of start stitching, I can feel my confidence building. And I might try a zigzag because that's always kind of fun. And I can pick any stitch I want. I don't have to worry about the settings because the machine has already made sure to stay limited. And look, it even shows you with a double needle function there that that is actually on. Another thing that I do know is when we turn the machine off and turn it back on, it will remember that setting. So if I was to leave this kind of with the double needle or twin needle on, tomorrow it will come up and say, oh, by the way, you still have this engaged. It's not a setting that just clears by turning the machine off. You can use your thread snips and it will cut the threads no problem. And then you can start to see what cool stitches can be achieved. And I've got some variegated threads starting here. So let's do something more fun. I do find that if I stay away from stitches that are too dense, I might have better results. But you can always start to, oh, how about some of these? Wouldn't that, oh, look at that. Maybe a little longer. We could spread it out if we want, or even make it, no, we can't make it wider because that's 7 millimeters. That's as wide as it can actually go. So we'll just go do some stitching here. Oh yes, and it really kind of looks like a calligraphy pin. Kind of give us a ribbon look as we sew. So I'm going to just push my thread snips, they'll end at the pattern and then cut it for me. So when we talked about sewing decorative stitches, can you imagine the stitch combinations you'll have if you went ahead and then went back, put a twin needle on, and started stitching all the stitches again to see which ones are going to have kind of their own new look just by adding 2 needles instead of 1?